Hello YouTube, Gaming Goddess here with the review on an RPG Maker game called Hoven the Sage's Spinel. This game was donated to me by the developer himself, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to play the game you and your team worked on. Now this game has a very traditional RPG feel and look to it, so with that being said, our main character Bradley Silver just turned 18 and is on a quest to find his father. Now let's get into the review. First, let's start with the gameplay. As I said before, we are presented with a very traditional RPG style of gameplay given that this game is an RPG Maker game. Now assuming that most of you have played an RPG Maker game at least once, the controls are real simple. If you haven't, don't worry, the game gives a mini controller tutorial that the player can view at the beginning of the game. Now the player can freely move around between towns, dungeons, and of course the world map. I did notice that if a player tries to access an area too soon, the player will not be able to enter that location. This is an interesting feature and I actually kind of like it. To me, it feels like it keeps the player on track, and yes, I'll admit it is very linear, but it's not too bad in my opinion. Even though the game's story is very linear and very straight to the point, the player still has the occasional side quest, which I guess you don't technically have to do, but I do them anyways for the extra experience points. Aside from side quests, the player can also visit a variety of shops in each of the towns. This is where the player can buy weapons, armor, accessories, and useful items. When a player obtains a new weapon or new equipment, the player can go into the game's menu and equip the rightful armor and weapons to the rightful party member. So not only are there shops, but there are also various chests around the world map, in the towns and even in the dungeon-like areas. Chests will hold weapons, armor, accessories, and useful items, as well as certain key items that are important to the game's story. Some chests are harder to get than others, but with the right tools they can be accessible. Personally, during my playthrough, I was unable to figure this out. Now moving on to the game's battle system, Hoven's the Sage's Spinel features a turn-based battle where the player takes turns with the enemies in attacking. The player has basic attacks, special skills, magic, and they can also use items. In order to trigger a battle, the player has to be walking around the world map or on the field map for a random enemy encounter. Since it's all random, there is no telling when it will happen. Each area inhabits different types of monsters, and each of these monsters have their own weaknesses, which can be viewed by buying monster cards, which are actually pretty useful. The only time a monster will be visible on the map is if it's a boss fight. Once the player finishes a battle, they will be rewarded with experience points, money, sometimes items. As the player's party members level, they will also learn new skills. I personally like the battle system in this game. In fact, a lot of the RPG Maker games follow the same style exactly, or at least like something similar to it. It's real easy to figure out, and honestly I can speed through a lot of the monster battles because there really isn't too much wait time, and again, it's real simple to get the hang of. Now let's take a look at the game's graphics and audios. This game is programmed pretty nicely actually, and there weren't very many graphical errors except for the fact that this butterfly here is flying through buildings and doors. Now, I don't know if that's something that can be fixed, but overall the game runs pretty well. I believe the majority of character sprites and pictures were created by the developers and not just the preset characters that the software already has. As for the audio, this game has absolutely no voice acting, but we have cute animal sound effects and amazing music. The music is probably the best part about this game. Now let's take a look at the pros and cons based on my opinion. First, some pros would include the general gameplay is good, the music is really good, there are plenty of places to explore, and there are side quests. As for the cons, I feel like the character development was lacking, and the story is real straight and to the point, which is okay, but I feel like there was no real build up to the story at all. Overall, Hoven the Sage's Spinel is a decent game. As I mentioned previously, the game's story is real linear, which can be okay at times, but honestly, I don't feel like there's any real development. I don't know, maybe the characters just weren't quirky enough for me. Now, there are a few parts that were actually interesting, but in general, the overall story just wasn't doing it for me. Aside from the story, the gameplay for this game is actually really good. It's easy to figure out what to do, and the controls aren't difficult to learn at all. Also, a huge plus for me is the music. This game offers a really cool soundtrack, and I think even the battle music changed about halfway through the game, which is awesome in my opinion. Now, I'm really sorry I couldn't get into your game as much as I would have liked to, and with that being said, I give Hoven the Sage's Spinel an overall rating of 5 out of 10. It definitely has potential, and I'm sure a lot of people like it, but my biggest thing is story and character development. This game is available on Steam, and if you feel like you might be interested, don't hesitate to check it out. This is my honest opinion, and you really shouldn't base everything off of what I say. And who knows, you might actually enjoy it more than I did. Don't forget to leave a like if you like this video or found it helpful. Also, leave me some comments in the comment box below. I love reading what everyone has to say. Subscribe and support my Patreon for some special goodies. This has been a Gaming Goddess review, and remember to keep on gaming.